So what we're talking about today is two big things. Is around how can we learn lessons, using the frameworks of Malcolm Gladwell's tipping point. How does that show trends in the market around shifts of market, shifts of behaviour, and what does it have in terms of legacy industries such as banking? So I start with a very opinion-based slide. This is my opinion of traditional banks today. They are blind and dependent. They come up with an array of different excuses as to why they aren't doing certain things. And internally you may have heard these before, like we're waiting for the regulator to tell us what to do. MAS hasn't told us what to do yet. We can't do anything. We are targeting high net worth. The Citibank, ANZ have all come into Asia and said, oh, we're just going after high net worth. We don't worry about everyone else. Customers want branches. I've heard executive bankers say this over and over and over again, despite statistics showing now that 99.7% of all transactions no longer happen in the branch. Yet the branches usually get the largest allocation of the P&L from budget to actually grow, expand, do refits, build frank, those kind of things. The last thing there is it's around, they always continually say there's no business case in mobile. What's the return? It's around people are really missing some very obvious signs. This is why I'm trying to change banking in, let's stop talking about excuses. We just need to figure out how do we get this job done because the consumer is changing in front of our face. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little case here. A little friend here is Isaac Lim. Isaac Lim was born on the 29th of June 2007. Now, as anyone in this room can tell me the significance of his birth date? The iPhone. The iPhone has been one of the most dramatic transformational tools in banking in the last 100 years. We've seen a plethora of mobile banking apps. We've seen Breeze. We've seen various Octopus. We've seen all the different services come to fruition with people trying to think, how do we get in the iPhone platform? What do we do on the iPad? How do we respond to this? Because it's become one of the largest shifts in consumer behaviour from basically your smartphone becomes your lifestyle choice. So Isaac becomes a very important case study right throughout my talk today. Main reason being is because he will never use an Encyclopedia Britannica. Encyclopedia Britannica was in print for 244 years, longer than OCBC's been around. Okay? And now it's no longer in print. It was stopped this year. Their business is gone. Totally disrupted by Wikipedia. Isaac will never probably see a product catalogue in the junk mail. Long gone are the days where you'd receive your Care For and your Courts and so forth brochures in the mail to give what's the latest sales, what's the latest promotions. Now there is some dwindle of that happening, but the volume is at 0.7% of what it was 20 years ago. Junk mail is almost gone out of our life. Isaac will never go to a peep show. This business model has been digitally disintermediated. There is different ways to do this now. He will no longer place a classified in a print newspaper. The likes of Craigslist and eBay have come along. But we start getting more real. He'll probably never, ever even know what the yellow pages are. Or a landline telephone. Landline telephone are declining at such rapid rates that I actually believe they'll be extinct in 2021. There's this really cool, fantastic machine which a lot of your bank is dependent on, which Isaac will never use. A fax machine. Here comes a generation that he will what, you put a piece of paper in a telephone and it sends it somewhere? He just won't understand that. Let's get a little bit more deeper. He will never use an optical disc. That includes CDs, DVDs. These things are going. Replaced with business models around the world, Netflix, Hulu. Apple TV has just been released in Singapore, 6 weeks ago. Isaac will never probably use cabled networking. This is a technology in most banks that's only 15, 20 years old. Again, these technologies are getting younger and younger and they're all obsolete. But there's a big one here as a reference case. He'll never go to a bookstore. He'll never go and rent a DVD. All these sort of stores now are, essentially what I say here is bricks and mortar distribution is gone. If you have a look at every single innovation we've seen in the last 12 years, every single time they've tackled bricks and mortar distribution. Every single time. And succeeded overwhelmingly. Every single time. So do you know anyone else that uses bricks and mortar? A bit of a thought-provoking slide anyway. Interesting statistic is, in countries around the world, numbers are greater than 80% now in almost every market that people do not visit branches. And in fact, an overwhelming statistic shows that of branch traffic today, most of it is forced traffic. I had to go to the bank branch to put my papers in. I had to go to the bank branch to deposit a check. Those kind of scenarios. It's not, people aren't voluntarily choosing this as a channel, they're actually being forced to do it. Which means Isaac will probably never write a check. This is an important leap in Isaac's little life. My business partner, Brett King, talks about a case study of his 11-year-old daughter, Hannah. Hannah has lived in 4 countries in the world. She's lived in Sydney, Dubai, Hong Kong, she now lives in New York. Her best friend lives in Dubai and she's in New York. Her best friend's birthday was 9 months ago. And Brett goes to Hannah, Hannah, what would you like to do for I think it's Chloe's birthday? She goes, let's send her some money, Daddy. And then he goes to her, well, how do we do that? He goes, it's simple, we just email or SMS it to her. That's her reality norm at 11 years old. Now let's not forget that she is 6 years away from choosing the banking relationship you'll have for life. Okay, so overwhelming statistics is people choose their primary banking relationship for life at age 17 when they're forced to get their first bank account, either for a student purpose, an employment purpose, or any other means. The important part of Hannah's case study is the fact that she doesn't even consider an alternate technology. So Brett put this story to her. What if we go down to the bank branch? We give the teller a $100 note. In exchange for that $100 note, they give us a piece of paper that has Chloe's name on it, $100 US. We put that in a birthday card, we put it in the mail and send it to Dubai. She'll get at the other end like, wow, I've got a birthday card. Go to the bank branch, and they'll give the piece of paper over, and they'll give her $100 US back at the other end. Hannah's response was, hey, Daddy, that will never work. Now, everyone in this room would know that is a check. That's how checks work today. There's a whole demographic coming up that won't even know what a check is, let alone use it. I think many in this room would have declining uses of checks, where your children won't even know what they are. So we come back to Isaac. And I spoke about when you choose your primary banking relationship and why this is very important for today's talk. He will choose his primary banking relationship in 2023, 11 years from now. Is OCBC ready to bank Isaac? It's around how do we have the plans in place? How long is it going to get to the place where you're ready to bank someone like Isaac? Or his friend Timmy here. Timmy is born on the 21st of November, 2000. Timmy's born on the same day as the very first smartphone ever existed. It changed the landscape. It's the grandfather to the iPhone. But it was a huge change in terms of what do we expect from a mobile phone? Timmy will choose his primary banking relationship in 2017. He happens to also happen to be as old as PayPal. PayPal, one of the largest disruptors in financial payments today. In 2012 alone, they will shift $12 billion US just on mobile devices. That's putting aside their whole online e-commerce business. $12 billion. That's a lot of payments they're putting through. Let's go one step further. Let's start getting more real. We have here Isabel and Ethan. Ethan born on the 10th November 2004 and his older sister born the 4th September 1998. Ethan is born the same day as the iPod. An almost obsolete technology now because of it's been integrated into everything else. And he will choose his primary banking relationship also in 2017. But his big sister is born the same day as Google. And Isabel will choose her primary banking relationship in just 2 years' time. A child the age of Google will have to go say, who do I bank with? In just 2 years' time. And her choices are going to be based on what she's grown up with. She's grown up in a world where Google is a given. She hasn't known a world before Google. So let's talk about our world and why it's so significant in terms of today's journey. Over the last 12 years, well actually let's take it out to Isabel's age, 14 years, consumers have gone digital at a faster and rapider rate than any other time in history. The internet in its first 17 years, around 83 to 2000, was a very slow uptake. It was early adopters, it was very slow. You're waiting there for 3 minutes, line by line, for that image to load, or that email to come through, or green screens, all very frustrating experiences. We're now in a world where digital is rich, it's on demand, it's mobile, it's changed the way we do everything. Every one of our services now, I can almost guarantee, 75% of the services you use in your life are in your pocket, in that phone. It doesn't matter if it's music, books, communication, it's in your pocket. So overwhelmingly in the last 12 years, it's a story of consumers getting digital. We continue to talk about the 2 and the 3 screen experience at home. The people that sit on the couch watching TV while on their iPad or on their iPhone. Now, these are the new experiences that have to translate over to other services as well. But one of the reasons that things have gone so viral so fast is this idea of social media. The democratization of voice, basically. Forget that it allows us all to connect in a network. It means that if I have an idea, and if just 4 of you like it, you'll share it. And then it goes to your network, and your network, and your network. In the 15 years ago, marketers would talk about the 1 to 10 the 1 to 10 voice. Is that if I have a bad experience, I'll tell 10 of my friends. And they might tell 10 of their friends, and we might get to 110 people. In the new world, I tell 500 people, and they tell their 500 people, and all of a sudden we're at a scale far beyond what we've seen in the past. The best example of this is the Arab Spring. We all know what happened in the Arab Spring. In Egypt, a population of 82 million people, where the government was put in power by the vote of 41 million people, was overthrown by 12,000 Twitter accounts and an idea. It grew so fast that they were able to throw a dictator out. Now, the reality is if I apply those same scaling economics to any of the G20 nations, including Singapore, you could throw the government out in days if you have the right idea. You get them angry enough about who's in power, the government will be thrown out. It's that democratized now. It's around, you're going to have a pretty crazy and cool idea for everyone to follow, because obviously a dictatorship is that's quite, it's a community way of actually uprising. But if you go to somewhere in the US, if you get something that has a large enough scale, you can get enough mass to eventually get Obama out of office. It's not that hard. And the problem is for a lot of organizations and people around the world, those discussions and ideas are spreading on so many platforms. It's hard to keep up. Most banks will have a Facebook fan page and maybe a Twitter account, but they're unaware of the conversations that are happening on the 37 other networks. Are they being blogged about? Is someone digging about them? Are they on Instagram? I took 2 Instagram photos when I came in here today. Is OCBC even aware of that? So how are they even aware of what the opinion of their brand is in such a diluted ecosystem? In that ecosystem, some fascinating things happen. This is what actually happens in the internet in just 1 minute. Look at this. 30 hours of video is viewed in 60 seconds on YouTube. That's broadcast like TV has never seen before. Here, almost 300,000 people log into Facebook in 60 seconds. Flickr, 20 million photos are viewed in 60 seconds. This is a scale that is just phenomenal. That's how do you even start to interpret this and understand it and what it means to your world? As individuals, we know because it means we can share with our friends, our family. We can see what our friend did on their trip to Italy, or we can see, I can see my family's from Australia. I can keep in touch in a very open dialogue. But there's also other networks that can actually communicate in there. But also in that world is some of the biggest disrupting businesses in the last 10 years. Amazon has completely thrown Borders out of business. It is now the largest distributor of publications in the world. Amazon even had the forethought to pivot. By pivot means changing their core business. Is that most people think that the Kindle as a cool technology, blah blah blah. But the reality is that Amazon realized one thing: they disintermediated Borders on distribution, but the disintermediation could go deeper, because essentially all you're doing is distributing words. So they realized that the Kindle was a better way to distribute word, faster, easier, and cheaper. So the pivot from the Kindle is actually quite significant in the distribution of books into the future. Netflix and Hulu are now essentially TV on demand in the United States. iTunes is now the largest music store in the world. Spotify, which is growing very quickly as well, it's just opened up in markets like Australia and so forth, is around how do you get music on subscription, any song you want. I have Spotify here. I could literally listen to a commercial version of any song in the world on demand. I no longer have to go to the CD store, and I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to pay anything per track because I have a subscription model. But the important part is all of those services have gone to this kid. A guy that has one of the most powerful devices in the world, the most personal devices in the world, in his pocket. Most people are so dependent on their mobile phone, to the point where, overwhelmingly, the statistics and research shows that people will forget their wallet before they forget their mobile phone. I'm guilty of this. I do it all the time. I don't even have house keys anymore because of, lifestyle here. Is that I will not forget my cell phone, but I will forget my wallet or anything else. I forgot my adapter earlier. I had to go back home and get it. It's around, this device is so powerful, so personal. You think about all the things in there, the personalizations you have in there, the messages to your significant other or to your children, or there's configurations to create your life. That is your life, your connected life on demand. And that frames the service expectation of the people like Isabel and Ethan. When they choose a bank, they're going to expect that. They're going to expect that signing up for a bank account is as easy as signing up for Facebook. So let's take the flip side of the coin. Take a look in the mirror. This is the banking industry. It hasn't really changed much in 200 years, has it? The reality is most bank boards look nothing dissimilar to this today. This is where decisions get made. Let's have a look at their world. Actually, another question for you. Who here actually carries around gold coins still? Anyone? Those old leather pouches you see in the medieval movies, strapped to your belt here, full of coins to pay for your food and so forth. No one carries that anymore. It's transformed. We had paper formation, money. Money was essentially, or currency was created to give an easy way to carry gold coins around. Because essentially this is backed by gold that's in the bank anyway. Then we had another paper form of it, checks. Even simpler than cash. So you don't have to carry around a bucket load of dong to buy a car. But what do you think money looks like today? Overwhelmingly, money is digital today. Very little currency is in circulation. In fact, most countries have a target to decrease the amount of currency in circulation by literally 50 to 60% within the next 3 to 5 years. The cash card program here in Singapore is exactly that. It's around how do we get some of those low-value transactions, high-velocity transactions, away from coins and low-value notes into a cash card. So we now have Nets, and we have EZ-Link, and we have all the ERP systems and so forth today to actually replace the actual roll of cash. But what's happened in parallel to that is we've seen a lot, and I mean a lot, of very angry consumers. With a financial crash, with bailouts in the United States, with poor experiences and so forth, we've seen outcries on banking like never before. And what's most dangerous about this is it happens in a world where opinion is democratized, where ideas can spread very, very fast. Who here, is anyone familiar with the case, I think it was of Annalise at Bank of America with her credit card last year? So what actually happened is Bank of America raised her credit card rate, her APR from 19% to 30%. She'd paid her credit card on time, every time, for 5 years. Good customer in terms of credit risk. They changed her APR to 30%. She expressed her opinion to her call centre, got nowhere. No, this is how it is. If you want our product, this is what it's going to be. So she created a 3-minute YouTube video ranting about it. Within 7 days, 17 million people had seen this video, creating this. This protest was actually started by her YouTube video. People physically got out of their chairs and protested outside Bank of America. And 27 days after putting that change on her credit card, Bank of America was not only forced to roll back the change, but also make a public apology. And this example I'll actually give a bit deeper on this case study a little bit later. Since the financial crisis, more and more consumers are being rejected for simple products, credit cards, home loans, car loans, and so forth. But more importantly, there's also voluntary rejection. People that are opting out. People that say, look, I don't want to fill out a 17-page form to open up a credit card. People like little Isaac and Isabel, who we spoke about before, they don't understand why they have to fill out this form. They can get everything else really easily and really quickly. Why do they have to go through all this process? So they're voluntarily excluding themselves from banking. To the means where in the United States now, globally, the fastest growing financial product in the world today is that of prepaid cards in the United States, which you pick up at Walgreens or your local convenience store, basically. You go in there, you buy the card over the counter, register on the internet, and off you go. You have a prepaid Visa card. And that becomes your transactional account for the rest of your life. This is growing annually, year on year, at 37%. These are people who are voluntarily saying, look, I don't want to bank with a bank. The service is not what I want. But this trend is already happening. One of the things we've also come that's happened through the crashes and the bailouts is the transparency and trust of what the banks used to be has gone. People actually will second guess their role of their bank. What are they doing with my money? There's a number of movements throughout the world, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy London, that are actually protesting on exactly this thing. These ideas, if spread, could essentially, crack down to the very core of what banks do today around lending. I mean, who of you actually knows what OCBC does with their own money? Do you know, for instance, that when you do an interbank, for instance, that a T+1 that takes a day to get to Standard Chartered, overnight OCBC can trade on that money without any liability to you? Most consumers aren't that connected to their money, and this is what's creating that mistrust. It's around the consumers wanting to understand things at a deeper level. So I come back to my opinion. Banks are blind and dependent in face of a huge change. So what does this mean? Obama's not significant, but what's significant about Obama is what he stood for when he was voted in 2008. All Obama promised when he came in was change, nothing else. He says the status quo's got to go. I promise change. Now it's up for question whether he's actually delivered on any of that, but he just promised change. Yeah, he brought some hope as well. In a world where everyone was getting more and more aware, in a digital world, we're getting more and more aware of things. So people now are more empowered about doing homework comparisons because of the internet. We're more and more aware of friends and family's opinions of their banks because of the internet. So this trend has created an undercurrent of opinion, which Obama leveraged and rode into office. The consumers are now all about my life. My lifestyle is my priority. Okay? Services fit into my life. And Facebook fits into my life. Twitter fits into my life. All those apps you have on your iPhone, your Android, or whatever, those services fit into your life because you don't have to go anywhere. In fact, it's not very inconvenient for you to do anything about it. This is actually going to drive the service expectations of banks. When you tell them, well, you have to come down to the bank branch to fill out a form, they're going to go like, why? And this has actually given growth to some major disruption. Many people will still say disruption is coming, but all four of these businesses have what's considered mainstream scale. PayPal currently processes something like 57% of all e-commerce transactions globally. That's huge. I mean, that's bigger than anyone else in the world. Square. Square is a tiny little device reader which actually changes the merchant business. No longer does a small business have to have a merchant account. Square is a merchant aggregator. You get a tiny little reader and everyone can collect money without having to go through the process of getting a merchant account approved. I mean, Square, for instance, just in the West Coast, has taken over 30% of the market already. 30% of point of sale. And the only ones they haven't touched are the large brands yet. Bank Simple is a way of how do we simplify and collate our lives. And Dwala is a way of how can we actually take out those hops, the T+1s on payments. So that if I send you money, it's there instantly. And this is the experience people are expecting. Important to note here, let's dig down on Square. Now explain Square's innovation is not this little reader. Forget that. Square's innovation is what sits behind all of this. Square has a master acquiring relationship with Citibank. They have a license to essentially go out and sign up their own customers with their own risk approaches to actually get, the hawker centres and all the little guys on board to take credit cards. I mean, Square's actually now, their new service doesn't even use the reader. I use this all the time in the United States. I register my credit card in here, but I can pay the merchant using my credit card. Now, Swift attempted to do this in Singapore, and the MAS blocked them. It's only a matter of time before this kind of service is required. It's around how do you make it simpler for a small business to take non-cash alternatives at a lower value transaction. Big alert here, though, is the volumes that Square's already doing. 1/8 of US POS transactions already are on Square. Square is not coming. Square is here and already has a mainstream cut of the US POS market. PayPal, as I said before, they're on track to do $12 billion this year just on mobile. Again, everyone says mobile payments, wallets are coming. Most of these businesses are already in full scale. Google Wallet's just announced in the last 48 hours that you can now use any credit card on Google Wallet. Makes it ubiquitous. I mean, they already had very large volumes. They had something like 13 million people using it in San Francisco and New York. It's around making this into the new transactional utility. Visa's prototyping their one at Olympic Games right now called V.me. But the important part of this is missing is, through all this change, how do we get involved with that customer's conversation? What do we do? What do we do as bankers, as practitioners? How do we even get interested in this stuff? And the reality is we have to think very differently. Who here thinks they could land an aeroplane on that airstrip? Even trained pilots would struggle to do this. This is something you've got to think very differently about, is how do you approach a runway like this? So how do you actually think about problems in a totally new world? And one of the most radical ideas I continually talk about is the idea that there is no such thing as the business and technology anymore. Your business is technology. Banking is just technology. As we said before, money is digital, so essentially without technology, you guys don't have a bank. Other than the gold you have down in the safe, you really don't have anything else. There's around need to embrace the idea of getting away from this segregation of technology as a cost center. Technology is now an enabler. And in fact, it's going to be your golden ticket to whether you succeed or decline in the next 10 years. Customer experience. I'm lucky I'm in the CX lab here. But customer experiences are going to be the first and foremost choice for consumers for banking in the next generation. And by next generation, we said it's as soon as 2015. It's as soon as, essentially the people in high school in Singapore today, when they have to go get a bank account, they will start choosing their bank with a frame of mind that's been shaped by Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, eBay, PayPal. That's going to shape their expectation of what a bank does. We need to think multi-channel. We need to think about the fact that it doesn't matter where they go. Everywhere they interact with us is the same. We add value. We understand that from channel to channel. It doesn't matter if they call a call center or they're using mobile banking. Every single time we're adding value to that relationship. But more importantly, we have to realize that that person is never going to bank in a place. Mobility is key. Is around how do we tap into the utility of a mobile phone? How do we really release its power? More than just mobile banking. It's around, remember, this is a lifestyle choice. Smartphones, iPhones, and so forth are a lifestyle choice. How do you really embrace that? I still haven't seen a bank that's really been deeply integrated into mobile. Actually, it's granted, Commonwealth Bank in Australia with Kaching is doing quite a good job, doing some things around pay to Facebook and so forth, but it's still not deep enough. It's not going to change the world. Because we have to think about, these people want to bank at any time. 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. There can't be time rules anymore. Everything else is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including Christmas Day, including Hari Raya, including National Day. You need to be able to bank on those days. You need to think about banking anywhere. Could an OCBC customer bank here? This is on a beach in India. The reality is an OCB consumer very likely they might go to a beach and might want to do a payment here. Like for instance, they're going to go here and we saw a promotion for this great scuba diving trip. Do I have enough money to pay for it? How does OCBC play a role there? More than likely, particularly when a consumer's overseas, their banking experience is very frustrating. Most banks think only within their jurisdiction. What I was saying is you're always banking, but never at a bank. Okay? Most people don't know it, but this is actually a bank branch. This guy has a service on his mobile phone where he can do everything a bank branch can do. He can sign people up for an account. He can do deposits. He can do withdrawals. Now, I've taken a very sophisticated version. I usually use something out of Kenya or Cambodia for this slide. But the idea is you have to think that this guy can serve your customer. He is a potential customer acquisition point. He is a potential deposit point, withdrawal point, payment point, referral. Any of those things that happens within the banking ecosystem is if you have to think about what this guy's doing. And he's running on a generator. He's not even connected to the mains power. So how do you enable things in there? So that you actually become a part of everyone's lifestyle. Right? How do you get very deeply integrated into someone's life? almost to the point they don't have to consciously think about going to the bank or interacting with their bank. They just do things on a daily basis. For the large amount of the volumes that Instagram saw in its early days, most people didn't think they were using Instagram. They thought I was taking a cool photo and sharing it with my friends. Banking has to get down to that simplistic level. So let's go back to something where this is something we have to pay a lot of attention to. When we spoke before about the Bank of America scenario with the APR, this is the 3 months after her APR was adjusted back. So her APR was actually adjusted back in July, and this is the 3 months after. Now there's some key data here. The green one is the Bank of America share price. The blue one is sentiment on Bank of America's brand on social media. Unbelievably, look at this. Sentiment predicted Bank of America's share price, and by this is almost a 15% share price fall, and it predicted it by 3 days. But it also predicted all the ups, the downs, up, down, always the social media sentiment, the consumer opinion that's being democratized through Facebook, Twitter, and so forth. This is driving share price now. In a speculative market, this one of the hottest topics right now in the trading world is sentiment algorithmic trading. Is how do you tap this? I mean, this is a huge potential if you can predict the market every time by 2 days. But there's an important thing for a bank here is that if opinion goes against you, your investors are now going to be very unhappy. This is happening to one of the largest banks in the world, Bank of America, where we can see the year stock down 50% purely based on speculation. No fundamentals in the whole bank changed. All that happened was there was a sentiment trend against their bank over a period of 12 months. If you want to dig in later, I'll get the slides out. These are all the key words which comes out from Facebook and Twitter and what was actually the opinion and why it went that way. But essentially, sentiment drove the share price drop. So let's think forward. We've done a lot of analysis over the past. I think how do we go forward as bankers? How do we think when we go back to our desk on Monday? Actually, most of you probably won't work. It's National Day next week, so no one's going to work next week. So you've got to remember this for 10 days. It's around how do we go from a caterpillar to a butterfly? How do we transform? This is not going to happen overnight. This is going to be a slow process. In fact, one of the analogies I continually use is, if anyone reads my blog, banks are like huge oil supertankers. Okay? How long do you think it takes for a supertanker to do a U-turn? It's very close. It's 13 kilometres to do a U-turn. Well, they can't, because the inertia momentum going forward is so high. I mean, so what they can say, if they were to do it with what's called a crash stop, which means reverse all of the engines, basically just flick a switch, every engine goes into reverse, to get brakes, it still will take them 9.5 kilometres to stop. So this is why I get the opinion is that banks are like super tankers. If you want to adapt to this new world, we're going to have to start thinking ahead. You have to take back the idea to your teams, and the discussions you're having internally is around how do you think about the next generation today? Because if we aren't thinking now and the changes aren't in effect internally, in 10 years' time, OCBC might not be here. It's around how do we take some of the practices which Dave's team here does very well. It's around how do you start thinking about the customer's life? The idea around doing user journeys and customer stories and so forth is very powerful. Why? Because it comes back to the theme I talked about before, about lifestyle integrated. You start thinking about where is the consumer when they're going to think about your product, about thinking about your service. Where will they be? Will they be in Ion? Will they be at Changi? And will they be in a hawker centre? Will they be on their commute home on the train? Knowing where they are, their lifestyle they fit in, the choices they're going to have, the psychology going through their mind is very important for how you start thinking about products. You guys are very lucky. You have one of the most highly regarded CX teams in the region here that actually already do this for you. But you need to figure out how do we transform this to be a digital business. The idea that a brochure in a branch is going to have any effect, there might be huge numbers and great ROI numbers behind that, but the reality is it's not preparing for the future. Don't get me wrong, physical presence is the role of the physical branch will still be around for some time as a relationship and branding tool. Now, you guys have got Frank, cities had their change as well. Like, there's been a number of changes around branches. But what you're seeing is the role's changing. They are no longer those big mahogany counters to do cash deposits and checks and so forth. They are now more like Apple stores. I hate using Apple as an analogy, but it literally is. It's a space that actually might be appealing to have a conversation. Because the reality is the conversations that are going to happen in here are going to be more advisory, asking questions and so forth. Very little product is ever going to be chosen in here. More than likely, someone's going for a home loan or a mortgage, they've already chosen online at home. That's around how do you, again, from digital to physical, how do we make that multi-channel experience consistent? So that, for instance, if Scott Bales is in the market for a home loan, before I even come here, there's more than enough data to let OCBC know what I'm looking for, where I'm looking at a house, how much money I'm going to spend, what my income is. Most of the decisions can be done before here. And that experience has to be consistent. There can't be the idea that I've built up this plethora of data on my home loan search outside the branch, only to come in and have to reiterate it all over again. That's not a good experience. Now we have to figure out the holistic lifestyle experience. And the other way to do that is to think about technology is the business. It's the very DNA of everything you do. You think about it, almost 80% of everyone's job in this room, I could guarantee, is very dependent on technology. We have to understand that relationships matter. More than just numbers, more than KYC, more than account numbers, is how do you turn a relationship into a value add? How do you take the insights you have today so that the consumer feels they're getting value back in that relationship? Because the reality is internally, in your core banking systems, in your payment systems, in your online browsing numbers, you have more than enough insights today to add value back to every single interaction with the consumer. You know all this stuff, we're just not using it. It's also around how do you open yourselves up to third parties as well. Banks all around the world are now opening up to third parties. So they're converting their local 7-Eleven into a bank branch. 7-Eleven already has a very high cash turnover business. Why can't they do deposits and withdrawals on behalf of OCBC? You already have the card. That's all you need in the branch. So why can't we do the same thing in a 7-Eleven? So opening up to those ideas of working with the ecosystem. But more importantly, is how do you get socially engaged so that those dialogues that are happening, the scenario that happened at Bank of America doesn't happen to your bank. Because when it happens, it'll happen really fast. We have to figure out, do we even know what our brand has spoken about? And it doesn't matter if you're in consumer banking or private banking or institutional. Your opinion is still going to be expressed right across a number of markets. Now I'm going to put a competitor on a pedestal here for a second, but I think it's a very important slide. Is a competitor had a speech at Next Bank Asia a little while ago, and he spoke about some very, very core things, the DNA that have to shift over time around technology as a business. This is actually, I stole his quote. I now talk about this every day. He doesn't know about it. It's around how do you sell experiences and not products. You no longer sell an account. Think about the experience an account actually creates. And if you can connect with that experience, you'll sell a product a lot better. Be open to experimentation and failure. Failure is not a dirty word. Failure is just a lesson. It's around failure is actually the best lesson anyone can have. The customer owns the customer. This is very important. It means that they own their world. They are now empowered beyond any other predecessor generation. They own their opinion. They will share their opinion. They have a choice, they have the power, and they also have the information to compare everything you do to your competitors. There's around things, don't fly solo. It's around, don't do things by yourselves. Open up the idea of partners. There's some things you just aren't good at. And you have to speak the advice or the guidance of a third party. Whether that be an agency or a consultant or 7-Eleven, it's around how do you open yourselves to those discussions for a possibility. Plan to go big or go home. This is one of the things I continually come back to in a lot of my talks. And this is why I use the reference cases of Isaac, Isabel, and so forth, is because if you aren't planning to bank Isaac, your bank may not have a future in 10 years' time. because it's going to take you a long time to get there. The idea of being prepared to pivot on that as well, though, is you are making a forecast on where the market might go in 10 years' time, but don't get emotionally attached to that. The idea that if the iPhone 5 in September is so radically different that it locks banks out of their own banks, how do you pivot to that scenario? How do you respond to that? What if some crazy cool new technology comes out in 2013 which completely changes the market all over again? It's around having a long vision, but being open to the idea of change as well, and we call pivot. But main thing here is, boring people don't build great experiences. The idea is, how do you really embrace the passion of your people so they aren't just people coming to work, email send, email send. Those people are not going to be the future of your bank. The people that actually bring their passion in. And I literally mean people that will talk about their kids, their hobbies, their holidays. You know, someone in this room might be crazy passionate about social media analytics, but has never had the courage to bring it up. Someone here might be a huge tech file that gets the latest iPhone the day it comes out. That person has amazing insight as an early adopter around getting onto technology. They have an open mind, learning from their passions. So how do you embrace these things? So one of the things I talk about here is that as banks, what are you missing in your own market? What are you missing as hard numbers to sell to your senior executives? Here's some really crunching numbers for you. 80% of all smartphones sold in Asia now are smartphones. And they're first-time buyers. So they're moving from either feature phones or their very first phone is a smartphone. That's a very compelling change in people's lifestyle. But look at this. Smartphone penetration in the three largest markets in the region. The three smartest regions. So Singapore's smartphone penetration is at 61%. 61% of all mobile phones sold in Singapore are smartphones. Australia and Hong Kong slightly behind. Important numbers here, 80% penetration of mobile in the region. And, with something like 3 billion people in the region, that's a very high number. That's actually 4 times more people than have PCs. This number alone tells me, why would you spend any money on internet banking anymore? Mobile is more important. Here, overwhelming statistic, over 50% of people say mobile banking is now key to their bank choice. 97% transactions just in Asia are done outside the branch. Right here, this is your ROI number to sell. In 2020, 3.2 billion middle class will be in Asia. That's a huge market. Now, yes, a large portion of that will come from India, China, Indonesia, but that's a huge number. That's a lot higher than now. Let's get more specific. Let's look at Indonesia. Indonesia, the largest consumer of mobile web pages in the world. 661 pages per month per person. They are actually 40% clear of the second highest market, which is Brazil. That's huge. Mobile is so important in Indonesia. Here we go. First, 80% of 16 to 24-year-olds in Indonesia, which is actually something like, I think the number was 67 million people, own smartphones. My math isn't that great, but that means about 55 million mobile smartphone owners just in Indonesia between the ages of 16 and 24. The largest Twitter market in Asia, 24 million people. And the only reason it's not bigger than China is because China blocks Twitter. But it's the largest Asian market, bigger than India. The third largest Facebook market in the world. There's some trends here that if you have a strong enough opinion, you can shift a market very, very fast. Egypt had lower penetration numbers than this, and they threw out a dictator. So that pretty much sums up the main content of my talk. I want to go into a quick summation. These are the core themes we've spoken around, is around how do you really understand that the future really is digital and experiences become key. Mobility is key. But keeping in mind here is around what are the things we need to do? Like if you're thinking, if you're thinking about your career planning, your next job, take these into account. Is there an area of the digital world that you actually are passionate or curious about? Do you want to get involved in CX? Do you like mobile? Even think about your own home personal problems. Who here would like to bank and do their budgeting on an iPad? Around figure out what are your pain points. Do you hate the application form in the branch? Get passionate about that. And all of a sudden you become the champion of it. It's early days now, so whoever does it first is going to get the job. But the key takeaways is really need to connect to the consumer behaviour. It's around how do we get lifestyle integrated. Technology is the business. Well, let's go. Creating experiences and around just doing anything. Innovate something. Think about even the smallest possible change. Have a go. Learn from it. Share the experiences. If you want to read further, these are my 3 Bibles. Start with Why from Simon Sinek, and this talks about consumer behaviour and choice, but inside the psychology of why certain experiences and products thrive. I mean, it literally means asking yourself why, to levels which is unbelievable. The third screen is an amazing insight into what the mobile phone can do in space. And there's Brett's book. I don't like talking about his book. I want to leave you with something here is around what should I do? Or even a better reference case, what would Google do? Because Google's the kind of company that is responding to this with Google Wallet. And more importantly, is it even possible? Too many times I get excuses from bankers. It's not possible. For all those excuses we spoke about before, I'm here to demystify them. Many people in this room will know I have 2 jobs. One, I'm an advisor to the user strategy. I do speaking like this all the time. The other thing, I'm starting a bank. I'm starting a digital-only bank that embraces everything I spoke about in the last 49 minutes. A bank that you sign up using your Facebook credentials. A bank where we are very deeply understanding of your opinion of our brand and reward you for positive opinions. An idea that uses game theory to actually improve financial health. In fact, one of the best reference cases is this little brand on my arm. Does anyone recognise it? This is Nike's new Fuel Band. Okay, this sits on my arm all day and gives me a score on my physical activity for the day. So at the moment I'm at 2,379. My target is 4,000 for the day. Okay. All this is a feedback loop to make me aware of my activity, so I can relate my activity to my overall health. This is Weight Watchers for the 21st century. You know, it's around how do you become more aware of some of these things. So in Movement Bank, we've actually done that. We've created a Nike Fuel-like score called CRED. It's around how do we take in all of your life, give it a score, and then help you improve it. Really, really simple theory. Foursquare does this. LinkedIn does this. Think about all the apps on your mobile phones today. They probably have some kind of scoring mechanism or game theory behind it which helps you come back more and get better and better and better. Most of Zinca's business model is based on this, with Farmville and so forth, as they encourage you in different ways to actually come back. But more importantly, is mobile is the centre of the world in our bank. You can actually open an account with Movement Bank from your cell phone. You don't have to go anywhere. You just need your Facebook credentials. Yes, in the US we need social security number and so forth to meet the KYC requirements, but we don't make it a form, we make it a journey, like signing up for Facebook or Twitter. And we bring that into 3 key areas. Is around, we realise that the mobile ecosystem is quite important. So how do we make the service relevant in that ecosystem? How do we bring to the table the user experience of 3rd-generation apps like Path, Foursquare? You know, these are guys that have groundbreaking user experiences. Is bringing those to banking. And last is around the scoring mechanism. CRED score is around how do we actually score that and gamify it over time, so that we essentially become a transparent bank. You can see how we work. We don't hide how the scores work. We don't hide fees. You know, we are very transparent. We become highly social, so that if you speak positively or negatively about us in your social scene, you get positively or negatively impacted on your score. Because then we can use that in 9 different gaming dynamic ways to essentially help you get smarter with your money. Because over time, we want you to spend, save, and live smarter with your money. The Nike Fuel, basically, of banking. And the reality is, CRED's live, by the way. It went live last week. It's a scoring mechanism which takes in a lot of data, and I think we've already got 300 users in like 4 days, so it's not too bad. but it's around how we're starting our journey. We're doing it. We're not making excuses. We're actually getting out there. I mean, if you look at our team, most of us have come from industry and we've bet our careers on this. It's around how do we really prove to the industry that all those things that your senior execs say you can't do is actually possible. With the right passion and the right direction, the people that do these kind of things internally, projects like this internally in the bank, are the people who are going to be leading the bank in 10 years' time. So I'll leave you with that thought. One last one, going back to little Timmy. Very important thing there. He'll be high net worth in 2030. So thank you for everyone. That's my last slide.